All right, what's up? What's up? I think we're live, Josh. So, man, Josh, welcome. Imagine for a moment you're standing at the edge of like a vast empty warehouse, right? And the silence is deafening. Suddenly, your phone buzzing. It's a notification from your CRM. In that instant, the warehouse explodes into life, right? Forklifts, trucks roll in, pallets stack high. The once empty space is now a bustling hub of activity. And in that single notification, it's not just data, it's the heartbeat of opportunity. It's the difference between stagnation and growth, between barely surviving and truly thriving. Now, picture this happening not just once, but hundreds of times a day. Excuse me, each ping, each alert, each data point transforming into tangible business, real revenue, actual growth. This isn't some far off fantasy, right? This is the power of mastering freight in the digital age. This is what separates yourself from the 99%. And today with Josh Lyles, we're going to show you exactly how to make this your reality. So are you ready to step into the future of freight? And if you guys are new, I'm Kalei Poteat, and I want to welcome you to our weekly live stream. I'm thrilled to have Josh Lyles, founder of SalesDashCRM, with us today. We're about to dive deep into the world of freight sales and uncover some game-changing strategies. So Josh, great to have you here, man.
Kalei, thanks for having me, my man. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
Absolutely. Well, tell me a little bit about if the for everyone that hasn't heard of you or don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about how you got started in trucking, freight. Give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So, my name is Josh Lyles. I'm from Atlanta originally. I kind of got my sales career started off actually selling shoes at New Balance. And then I transitioned over to Tesla in the earlier days and was with them for 3 years as a sales advisor, sales manager. And I started with them in the Atlanta market, moved up to they moved me up to Nashville to oversee this market. And then my first two friends that I actually met here in Nashville that I was friends with for my first year and whatnot were in logistics. I didn't fully know what they did, but they actually had worked for a freight brokerage, and we would go out, hang out, and they would always be with their coworkers, which was a little odd to me because like I never hung out with my coworkers, but
Mm,
it was kind of just a tight knit group. They got along really well, and they loved what they did. And so I got to a point where I was looking outside for other jobs and didn't really care what industry I was gonna be in or even what state I was gonna live in. I just wanted to experience something new. And so one of them, when I let them know that I was kind of looking at anything and everything, said, "Hey, you should just come interview with our company. It's, maybe not sexy or, just it's going to be totally different than what I was doing at Tesla, but um, that was ultimately how I got in it. I ended up doing like 4 on-site interviews. It was for a sales manager position. They had a national office with 2 sales teams. I was going to be the third, and would have to build a team of 12 from scratch of account executives and account managers, really focused
mm,
on shipper selling and shipper expansion. And yeah, I mean, after going on site, seeing the energy, how much people are on the phone, problem solving, negotiating with
mm.
carriers, cold calling, all that stuff, I was hooked. So yeah, I joined, and that's I think kind of like anybody else, just sort of stumbled into it through mutual connections, but it was never one of those things growing up as a kid where I was like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do. I didn't even know about it.
Yeah, 100%, man. So, can you share with us what was that pivotal moment that transformed your approach to freight sales once you kind of got started?
Yeah, so getting started, so coming out, I would say this, like coming from Tesla, I was there in hyper growth mode at Tesla. And I would say that their sales process and the way that they thought about sales and pipeline management, generating leads, following up with leads I mean, it was just really strong. And the other thing that they had was just a really strong learning and development team and program, which goes into skill development, in regards to like, of course, it's not just about capturing leads. It's not just about doing test drives. And then when it comes to pipeline management, there's a lot of situations where people just don't really know what to do with the leads that they have. And
Mm,
I'll give one example. I won't talk too much about my experience there, but I had moved from our higher volume location to our lower volume location in Atlanta. So I moved from their Buckhead location at that time to their Alpharetta location because they were firing the sales rep at the other location. They had no manager there. And so when I went over there, basically I took over this guy's pipeline of the leads that he had and was able to just pick up the phone and close 3 deals strictly from just picking up the phone within a week for people that he just had sitting there, but just really wasn't following up with people. And those cars were expensive. And this was at a time where their cars were on average about like 94,000 per sale. So it's still not the easiest sale, but it just, to me, it required like a specific steps within the sales process and being pretty thorough. So then when I transitioned over to freight brokerage, I just there at this time, this is back in like 2018, there was a lot of people that were just focused on dials. So, hey, we want to get 100 dials a day, 150 dials a day, rather than actually understanding that the connects are what matter. And then it turns into what happens within those connects. And so really the opportunity that I saw was in working with my sales team. So I had 6 reps that I would say are more hunters that were cold calling out to shippers constantly on a day in and day out basis. And then I had 6 account managers, which were just more farmers. So for those that we had shippers that we had already onboarded, trying to ship with different locations and facilities that they had, trying to see what all kinds of freight, spot freight, contract freight, project-based freight that they had, basically the whole opportunity versus just like, hey, we just onboarded them. There's a lot of work to do in that aspect. And when it came to pipeline management, it's basically just understanding like breaking down an account. So you take some of the large shippers that are out there, many of them have a wide variety of locations and facilities. And a really common situation is they'll have unique shipping managers, logistics managers, transportation managers that actually tender out their own freight at those unique facilities. So for example, you moving one shipment for one location, you closed a customer, but you're just getting started, right? Because you got to prove to them that you're a trustworthy freight broker. And there's a lot more work to do. So it was really just one staying on top of that because again, it comes down to earning the trust, and then eventually it becomes to playing a smarter game of what kind of customer are you reaching out to. So I'll try not to get too long-winded here, but certain customers are large, certain customers are smaller. If you go after the big enterprise customers that are whales, it's going to take you a longer time in your sales cycle to close that customer. It's also a little bit more frustrating because you call the shipper and they say, hey, you got to go call corporate. And you're like, damn, and that's just not the best experience versus a smaller shipper.
Right.
You call them and typically like you can get to the decision maker a lot quicker. And of course, you're not going to get an opportunity, I would say, early on, but what matters is the follow-up, right? You have to reach out multiple different times. They have to eventually get to know your name, your company name, what you specialize in, and that stuff. And so I think there's no special sauce that we became good at. I just brought in stronger fundamentals more than anything else around targeting the right kind of leads and following up with those leads, and then also being very detail oriented with the notes that we're taking when we do have those connects and maximizing on those connects.
100%, man. I love that. I did want to know, we have a couple of people on. Where you guys from? Put that in the comment section. If you have any questions, put that in the comment section as well. We'll go over those at the end. Want to know, do we have truck owners on? Do we have agents, brokers? Do we have dispatchers on? Let us know in the comments. Excuse me. Well, that brings me to another question, Josh. I wanted to know a little bit more about, when, after the sale is made, did you have or do you have like your own carrier network, or do you kind of, rely on the load boards a little bit, or how do you get the freight moving once that kind of happens?
So I think it depends on the kind of freight that you go after, and then where your carrier relationships are. So I think if you already have carrier relationships developed, it definitely makes sense to try to prospect within those areas. That makes sense in general because you as a salesperson can speak more confidently about the equipment that they have, what volume they have, when they're going to be available. It's a much easier sales call to make. It may even be quote unquote a little bit warmer. I will say in a lot of our situations, especially being a team where we started from scratch, a lot of it started off where you're building new relationships. So you were relying on load boards a lot. And I had 2 different instances in brokerage at 2 different brokerages. And I'll say like in my last one where I was our head of sales and oversaw 8 different sales reps, We ran pretty much almost all spot freight. It was basically all spot freight, all project-based freight as well. We typically, honestly, did not want to go after any contract freight. There are some freight brokers where they only want to go after contract freight. With contract freight, you definitely want to already have those carrier relationships in place.
Mm,
At the last brokerage that I was at, we specialized in open deck freight. So we ran a lot of stuff on flatbeds, hot shots, step decks, RGNs, all kinds of different trailer types within the open deck family.
mm,
And so with that, like, yes, we would have certain projects where we would rely on the same carriers that we knew could run those projects effectively and provide good communication. But, sometimes if you have a new customer that's in a brand new area, that's, there's going to be times where you have to rely on load boards. So it's a good mix, but I do think it really depends on the kind of freight that you're also going after. And, if it's a newer, maybe existing customer.
okay, cool. That's fascinating. Let's talk a little about personalization. How has the art of personalization and
Yeah,
outreach kind of evolved in our digital age, and what does that kind of mean for the trucking world?
for sure. So the first thing I'll say is this: if you guys go to any conferences and there's a shipper panel, or if you listen to some other podcasts that are out there that have shippers on them, I will
Mm,
say, and I listen to them every time I can, because at the end of the day, my customers that use Sales Dash are selling to shippers. So I want to know what shippers are looking for in the sales process, whether that's, us providing educational content, or even if that's tweaking something within the CRM. So a small
mm,
example in the CRM is we have a small area in the CRM that helps you profile shippers and qualify them. What equipment types do they ship? What modes? What special requirements do they have for their freight? Is it like hazmat, drop trailers, round trips, overdimensional heavy haul, that kind of stuff? Um, Basically, like, what do you know about them, or what do you not know about them? What obviously is their volume, and how can you try to understand if this is a shipper that you want to continuously prospect, or is it just not worth the squeeze because you don't service that kind of freight, or maybe volume doesn't make sense? But the one thing, going back to the shippers, that I will say is when you talk to them, a lot of them say that there's no personalization at all. So people are just calling them, they've never looked at their website, they don't even know what they ship, and they'll just be like, hey, I have trucks in your area,
mm,
right? And so there's really simple personalization things that you can do where it takes 90 seconds, 2 minutes of research going to the website, seeing specifically what products they ship, what locations do they have. You can obviously rely on your carrier network for what you have, but those are things that go a long way from even just talking specifically and using the names of those products that actually show you put a little bit of time, attention, and effort towards it. And I think, just as like somebody that is a seller, but I'm also a buyer of software and all kinds of random things. And I'll say this because I get a bunch of random emails from people that try to sell me stuff because, my title's founder, and Kalei, I'm sure you probably get some of this too.
yeah,
But I'll get emails of people that are like, hey, I've checked out your software. It's really awesome. But I know who's checked out our software because I can see who signed up for it, right?
right,
Or I'm
right.
super excited about what you're building. But like, if you haven't explored what we're building, to me, it just kind of comes off as fake, in that this is probably more of a scaled automated message. And I think in freight, it is so worth doing the personalization to really go to understand who you're targeting,
Mm,
because it's one of those industries, man, like, you don't need endless amounts of relationships. You
right,
need,
right.
if you have a solid five, maybe up to like 10 relationships with shippers,
Mm,
you can make a pretty good living even with just five solid ones. So why not spend the time and target them? But from a personalization standpoint, if you don't know anything about them, and then also on top of that, if you do 1 to 2 outreaches, you're going to struggle. And like,
mm.
that's all I can say. Freight brokers call them all, are calling shippers all the time. Carriers are calling them all the time, and you'll hear it constantly. So you got to do things to separate yourself, but follow up is a big fundamental on all that stuff, because at least it builds familiarity with who you are. But I do think that there's an attractive thing for them. While it may come off as maybe nagging or persistent, at least it's showing that you want their business and you want to service them. I think that's better than just like a one-time BS call with no information and just, hey, you got anything that you're trying to move today?
No, 100%, man. That makes perfect sense. I see a lot of people, well, a lot of truck owners, that don't utilize, the power that they kind of wield as much as they should. Um, But let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about technology and sales dash CRM. What's the biggest misconception about CRM software that's kind of holding? Well, let's back up a little bit. What is sales dash CRM for the people
Mhm.
that don't know? And then who is it for? Who does it help? And how does it help them?
Sure. So we are CRM software is customer relationship management software. And so like the simplest way I think to break it down is it's kind of a source of record for all of your communications that you've had with your customers and in your sales process. So what kind of calls have you made with your notes? You can send the emails typically from a CRM. You can log notes about your customers and your contacts. It's almost like just the digital notebook that you would use. So a lot of people, and this may be an easier way to describe it, but if you go on Google, start making sales calls, typically you're going to write this stuff down on sticky notes or a notepad, or maybe in spreadsheets on your computer. And you're going to say, hey, this is their name, this is their company, this is their phone number, this is their email. And I tried calling and I left a voicemail, or I spoke with Susan and Susan was out of office until Tuesday. The CRM
Mm,
allows you to basically have all that kind of information in it so you know what steps you took. The reason why you'll find a lot of freight brokers use it, and especially the top 100 freight brokers use CRMs, is because typically they're doing a lot of volume. And when you're normally getting over, let's just say 20 contacts, it gets really hard to keep up with all the notepad notes or even in the spreadsheets.
mm,
And so with Sales Dash, we're a system that's specifically built for freight brokers. So you don't typically have to customize it out, but we have things in the CRM to qualify and profile shippers already with some of the things that I mentioned earlier about, what exactly do they ship. We're probably, as far as I know, the only CRM that you can actually capture lanes for what that shipper moves.
mm.
It's not a TMS, but in most CRMs, or let's just say on your notebook, you may find out that they move Chicago to Atlanta drive-ins. That would be a note, but there's no way to search that information up in any other CRMs. And so we give you the ability to do that so you can say, hey, these are all my prospects. If you had a really trusted carrier, let's just say they've got 5 trucks looking to run Chicago to Atlanta with drive-ins or box trucks, whatever it may be, you can go in your CRM, type in Chicago, and see all the shippers within there. And we allow you to also expand that to say, hey, I want to see those within 25 or 50, 100 miles, because, there may be some in the cities that aren't technically labeled as Chicago, but just on the outskirts in the metro area. So we allow you to manage all of your shippers that you're doing for your sales outreach. And then we also give you the ability for your carrier relationships to also add the preferred carrier, the preferred lanes that they like to run. So if you are looking for carriers out of a specific area with a specific equipment type, you can also do easy searches for that, because what we often find is a lot of people will have that information in spreadsheets of their top or most preferred carriers that they're working with. So we primarily have brokerages and then also some asset-based companies that may have a brokerage arm. Some of them don't. They're actually just carriers that use the CRM, but basically anybody that primarily is doing some shipper outreach.
Okay, perfect. Well, cool. That's good to know. That's good to know. If you guys are using a CRM, put that in the the comment section. We love to know if you guys are using a TMS, any technology. We just would love to know if you guys are kind of using technology now. If you guys are open, are you looking at technology? Are you kind of you know wondering what technology to use to kind of enhance your freight or trucking business? Just let us know in the comment sections. We'd like to kind of know what you guys are looking at. So look into the future, Josh. How do you see like AI and machine learning kind of reshaping, the freight world, the trucking industry over like the next 5 years?
Sure. Really quick, I do want to go back to your misconception question because I would
Okay,
love to
yeah.
touch on
I'm
that.
sorry.
And
Yeah,
then let's talk some AI.
yeah, let's do that.
So what I see is the biggest misconception, and just really what I would say, and this does not mean like you need to use our product, but the biggest misconception I would say is that the best CRM is going to be the one that you use. If that's notebooks or if that's even spreadsheets, fantastic. But I think that if you're going to be somebody that's dedicated to doing sales outreach, you really just need to find a system that's going to allow you to be consistent, to make calls and make emails on a consistent basis. If you're not able to put consistent activity in, it's typically not really worth the effort because there is a lot of skill development that eventually goes into it in terms of how do you handle objections and have you done enough follow-up. So the biggest misconception is sometimes it's not actually about the specific software you're selecting. It's more so like, what are you actually going to use? And what's your game plan to consistently dive into that software on a day in and day out basis? So that would be the biggest thing that I would say, because we've seen people pour hundreds of thousands of dollars into CRM software before, and those projects don't work. And that's because the system wasn't really built to speak their language, and it didn't work with the process flow of the salespeople. So that's really what I would say. And everybody's different. And when I go to do on-site visits with teams of 5, 10, 30 salespeople, and I walk by desk, all salespeople look at the system differently. And so I think that
Mhm.
getting internal alignment is really important on that piece. Um, so transition into AI. So the question there, sorry, Kalei, you said was just like what was the question on the AI piece?
Well, let's actually save that one to the end. I want to save that one, but let's get a
Okay.
bit unconventional, because I like when you say you stepped on site for different offices, and seeing what other teams are kind of doing, and what's the most kind of unusual tactic that you've seen kind of work wonders in brokerages? Is it certain like pattern interrupts that you see a lot, or you know can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I would say any pattern interrupt. So one small example is people will ask us like, hey, do you have email templates that you provide that we can send out to our customers? And I always tell them like, it does not make sense for us to provide email templates, because if
Mm,
you're sending the same thing, and we have over 100 customers that use Sales Dash. So if all of our brokers and carriers that were using the CRM to do shipper outreach were using the same email templates, it's honestly just never going to work. And everybody's going to basically be like, okay, cool, you're all using the same software. So I think from, of course, on-site visits are always great, right? If you can shake hands with people face to face, there's always going to be a
mm,
large opportunity for you to separate yourself and do that. Um, but some of the unique things I guess that I've seen are, when you see people online, you want to figure out ways that you can go against the grain and sound different and be unique. You want to, um, I've seen people do some unique things where they'll actually like send, send over gifts and that kind of stuff. I think that
mm,
that can be unique. But if I just think it's simple that, hey, if most people are, for example, using the line of, we've got trucks in your area, wanted to see if you had any freight, you want to try to think of different ways to connect with them. So I think one of the best salesperson that I've managed, coached, and had the opportunity to work with, I'll give like one small
mm.
example, not to put all of his sauce out there.
Gotcha. Don't give them all the sauce. Don't give them all. So
Yeah.
we're not gonna give
Yeah.
everything, but
So what I would say is for example, a lot of brokers would be super happy if you got on a call with a broker, or I'm sorry, with a shipper, and immediately were able to get a quote. If
mm,
he knew nothing about the company, if he didn't know about their, like, basically their whole shipping operation, their challenges, what the typical requirements are for pickup, delivery, all that kind of stuff, he would actually deny it and say, I don't feel comfortable quoting it.
mm,
Because he felt that he needs to have a better understanding of what they do,
right,
how they do it, and what their expectations are.
100%.
And honestly, they're like, a lot of people I think would never even think to do that, or think, oh, that doesn't really make sense. Like, this is our job. Like, we need to provide quotes.
Right.
But I think that just the simple measure of taking the time to learn about their business first before
Mm.
you get into that makes a lot of sense.
No, that for sure, man. I don't feel like you could really kind of serve how you want to if you just don't know enough to actually meet what exactly that person or company might be looking for specifically, right? So you can kind of be more intentional with what it is that you're actually looking to help with. Great point, man. So rejection is kind of like a huge part of it. How can brokers cultivate like resilience in the face of constant rejection, and kind of turn it into a driving force for their success?
Just got to be prepared for it. You're only going to
Yeah.
get so many rejections, right? It's all similar stuff like, hey, we're happy with our providers, or we're customer routed, or we're not looking to onboard brokers or carriers at this time, like whatever it may be. It's always like the same rejections. And I think at a certain point, you just have to know, okay, when that comes, what would you say? That's the biggest thing. And it's a tree branch. And I learned some of this, when I was at Tesla and then in brokerage, it was kind of the same thing. But write down the certain things that you get as blockers in terms of why they would not consider you.
Mm,
And you want to just write all those down and say, okay, not if this happens, but when
right,
this
yeah.
statement comes my way, what do I say? Because if you're not prepared for it, this is the small stuff, but a salesperson's tone speeds up. They start stumbling, they start adding more filler words, all that kind of stuff. Somebody that knows that that's coming is going to be calm, confident. Their tone's going to be good over the phone because they've heard it before, they understand it, and they can almost let them know that, hey, I know that this is a common situation, or I know that typically when I first reach out to somebody, that they're not onboarding brokers and carriers, right? And I'm not saying like this is a good way to handle an objection, but I could just say something like, look, I understand when I typically reach out to somebody that they're not going to be onboarding brokers or carriers at this time. And I know that this may be the first or second time you and I have talked, but I think you and I both know that this is transportation and stuff always goes wrong. And a lot of the customers that I've started to work with, it took maybe sometimes 10 to 20 conversations for me, or maybe even 40 conversations for me to eventually start working with them. But we've always found that there's maybe a certain time where they get in a pinch and they need a truck. And I want to be that person that you can call if your current providers aren't able to help you out. And it's trucking and transportation. A lot of times those situations happen. So if I'm available super early in the morning or late at night or on the weekends, I just want to make sure that you have got my phone number, my email, and you can give me a call whenever that situation may arise. And I understand it's not going to be today. And
Mm,
again, but I think just being able to be prepared for whatever that may be. And I'm not saying that that's the best way to handle that objection when it
right.
comes your way, but having some type of response so you can get yourself further in the conversation, and at least they know when you call, or if they want to actually give you an opportunity because somebody messes up, because people will mess up. It's going to happen, but you got to make sure you're putting yourself in a good position with enough rapport and enough conversation so that way they know and they can say, hey, Kalei's going to be the first person I bring off the bench to give an opportunity, and say, all right, Kalei, I got one for you. What can you do with this one? They'll get you a quote.
Got you, man. We do have a quick question in here. I think somebody asked, we look for it real quick. They said they definitely love what they hear. Uh, this also for carriers? Can the carriers go? I think you answered that already though, right? You did.
Yeah, I mean, just in general, if you're doing shipper outreach and you're doing
Mm,
consistent sales outreach, I would say that the CRM is going to be helpful for you. And again, where it's going to help you is if you have a list of shippers that you're reaching out to, you can either manually add them into the CRM, or if you're using a lead generation tool, you can import as many as you need to from a spreadsheet. So that way you can keep track of all of your calls, emails, notes, and then the system really helps you with setting your follow-ups and staying on top of your follow-ups.
got you. Hopefully that answered your question, Eugene. If you guys do have questions, drop them in the comment section. If Josh has some time at the end, we'll kind of go over them. I'm pretty
For
sure he'd
sure.
love to kind of just know what you guys are thinking. Um, well, let's talk about lead generation a little bit. Josh, I know you are familiar with Apollo.io, and you did have a video that I seen was super insightful. What I've learned from making 1,000, no, 11,000 cold calls. That was extreme, very helpful
Yeah.
video. What do you see is like your guys's are, I guess, the most effective lead generation strategy? Is it cold email? Is it cold call? What do you guys like the most?
Are you talking about for sales dash or for freight brokers or carriers?
I would say for sales dash specifically, and then we can kind of
Yeah.
get in, what do you think is because 11,000 cold calls is pretty extreme. I don't
Yeah.
kind of recommend cold calls at all. I've just never had to. But I definitely see, people doing it a lot. And I think it definitely takes a skill set to kind of be able to do something like that very effectively. Um, but
Absolutely.
yeah, let's talk about how that kind of transfers into sales dash a little bit.
Yeah, so for us as a company, honestly, we're very cold call led and then content led for the most part.
Mm,
Um, Email is honestly something that I put further down the line because most people operate within email. And I just personally, from my experience with Sales Dash, if I'm reaching out to brokers or carriers, I'm going to find it more complicated to actually connect with them and to try to educate them on how the CRM can help them when it comes to their shipper outreach. Drew, who's my sales advisor, who was previously a broker and did the 11,000 calls as a broker, talking about his top five lessons, also was more cold call led because he typically found he was able to build connections and rapport better over the phone than over email. I would say
mm,
you have to just dive into the sales channel that you feel most comfortable with. More people are going to feel more comfortable with email. The reason why I like calls is simply because of that. I like
mm,
calling because most people will not call. And on a month in and month out basis, when I reach out to particularly like larger brokerages, I hear every single month myself, and this is my experience that I can only speak to from myself doing calls, is that I didn't get your email, or if I did get your email, I probably scrapped it. And you're lucky that you called, or if you didn't call, we probably wouldn't have connected. And so with that, I always prefer to do it because I can find out the situation quicker.
mm,
And I went through a pretty big cold email experience at scale and just didn't have success with it in a good way. I felt like it was actually limiting me personally on some of my opportunities to connect with people. Uh, and I would say that, like, there's probably a couple other reasons, but from making enough cold calls myself, I just feel comfortable with it.
yeah,
Feel,
that makes
I'm not going to come over and sound like a big telemarketer, and I think that's actually a big misconception when it comes to cold calls.
yeah.
Is you'll hear people put on this sales voice rather than the way that you and I are talking together. I should cold
Mm,
call you in the same tone of voice. Nothing should
mm,
be changed, right? And so I should call you and basically have this conversation almost if you and I were just like hanging out at a restaurant or a bar or, watching a sports game or something like that. I think people highly, highly underestimate that
mm,
not sounding salesy, not changing up your tone of voice is really big and really important. And so, um,
mm,
I will say for the people that use Sales Dash, we see them do a little bit of everything, but I feel like my biggest recommendation is just go super deep within one channel and do it in enough consistent volume. I think is really the biggest thing. I'm a big believer that none of the channels are dead between cold calls, cold emails, visits, social selling, but you have to do it in the right volume, you have to do it in the right consistency, and you have to be willing to educate yourself of, what works well for them. Like cold emailing, there's an art to it, man. Your subject line, the first line of your
yeah,
email, what your call to action is, the content that you're putting in there. It
yeah,
and the biggest mistake that I see people make when they're reaching out to shippers is they write an email this long.
yeah.
That email's long, man. Nobody's reading that email from a stranger. I'm
Right.
definitely not when I get those emails, but when you're emailing that to a shipping manager and they've got all these emails with tracking updates and, shipment information, order information, they don't have time to read an email that large. So there's a lot of skill and there's free game on the internet to learn about how can you craft a more gathering email versus just being like, here's everything about me.
Love that, Josh. Man, over delivering, man. I know got a lot of comments coming in, a lot of people coming in and out watching. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, definitely leave them in the comment section for us. Well, cool, man. In your experience, what separates like the top 1% of freight sales professionals from the rest? Is it like the skills? Is it the mindset or something else kind of like entirely?
Man, that's a great question. I think it's skills and mindset. I really do. I think mindset's bigger than what people take for it. Like you got to have a mindset where you're super persistent to go after anything and everything. Like you can't be worried about the no. If you're in the game of sales, I mean, you're getting more no's than you're getting yeses, and you got to be okay with that. But the skill development piece I do think is really big. Like, are you actually getting better at what you're doing? Or are you doing the same stuff? The definition of insanity is doing the same stuff over and over again and expecting a different result. So if you're not bringing on new business right now and you're still doing the same stuff, you need to change it. And those that are good about taking a look at, am I bringing on new business? Am I growing my business? And if you're not, you need to reevaluate what you're doing, because that's true intelligence. True intelligence is behavior change.
Mm,
It's not about just reading the books and the stories of what people did to become successful. It's about you changing your behaviors to get yourself into a better situation to grow your sales or to get, build a stronger skill set. So yeah, mindset, I would probably put number one more than anything else. You definitely got to have belief in yourself, and you got to have a good persistence that you're going to go out there and figure it out. And then the second thing, I would say, is skill development.
gotcha. Where do people actually? Well, I'll hold that question. We do have someone asked, what common mistakes do dispatchers make when dealing with brokers, and how can these be avoided?
It's a good question because I don't really deal with dispatchers as much anymore, but I would say from my experience and particularly like within brokerage is some of the mistakes is unclear or maybe unclear communication with their drivers. Um, so for example, like being in the open deck space, this wasn't, I would say, extremely common, but knowing the actual driver situation, where they're at, their status, are they empty, are they not, or are they loaded? And then specifically around their equipment, there would be not a lot of times, but there would be a good amount of times enough where that information was not confirmed or the dispatcher was relaying information that was not correct. And so I will say one thing that we had implemented as a brokerage internally from our process standpoint was to always confirm that information with the driver, and to speak with the driver to make sure the information from the dispatcher lined up. Because just truthfully, it was hard to trust that that information was correct from scenarios where they show up at the shipper and the wrong trailer type's there, or you finally get in touch with them and they're like, no, I'm not empty right now. And then that puts you in a bind and in a bad situation. So I think just having a really clear understanding of their equipment, if they like their requirements, like do they have straps, do they have tarps, that kind of stuff. I mean, that again is going to be more specifically in that situation. So I'm going to speak to that. That's probably what I would allude to on that, but clear, consistent communication and also knowing your driver situations.
Gotcha. Communication's huge. Hopefully that answered your question. MJ4 logistic. Okay, man. Yeah, I guess we could touch a little bit on the AI and machine learning. Save that for last. How do you feel like that's going to reshape, lead generation in the freight industry over the next 5 years? Do you think that's something that is it kind of overrated or underrated?
It's overrated right now, but it'll be underrated eventually. It right now is already impactful on the back office administrative side. There's already some really good stuff out there to help, whether it comes to data entry or process automation, that kind of stuff, that it's already making a pretty big impact for a lot of teams, and they're able to lower their overhead, increase their load count per day for certain people. On the sales side, I think where it's probably going to eventually, I don't think it's there quite yet. You'll see some people that are doing more outreach at scale and like personalization at scale. I will say it's not great personalization. Like I'll get people that hit me up on LinkedIn and it's one of my LinkedIn posts from like 9 months ago, super old. And honestly, sometimes it's nothing to do with my business. Like, hey, I saw your post about this person. I'm like, that person's one of my old employees from a company in another industry. Like that has nothing to do with what I'm doing right now, but that's
Yeah,
what your AI tool is picking up. So I think
yeah.
there's ways for it to get around. Where I think it'll be beneficial is, and if you think about what you're doing in the sales process, is like within the research standpoint, how can it help you shorten up or simplify your research or help you craft better messaging? There's some tools out there that can help you with email messaging, but I don't think that you should always take it because there's so many other factors that go into it in terms of the length of the email, your tone, your call to action, and obviously the research of who you're reaching out to, and is that information actually in the email. So I think it'll help with research and personalization. Um, and then, eventually there'll be some unique things around like the timing to reach back out, but a little overrated right now. I think don't get super caught up in it on the sales side, but on the operational, like back office side, you definitely should be implementing some stuff.
Cool, man. Cool. All right, cool. How much longer we got you, Josh? Do you have a couple more minutes?
I got a couple more minutes. Yeah. And then I gotta take off here.
Got you, man. All right, so let me see. Final question then. We got one more final question. How can Um, well, I want to think of something that kind of came to mind a little bit. Um, what advice would you give like a brand new trucking company? Let's just say they just got their new MC, their authority just went active. What advice would you have for them? Do they necessarily need to um hop on the spot market, or what should they be thinking about at that point in time?
Just in regards to starting to get business.
Yeah.
I mean, I think two things. I think it really start like it's just building relationships. That's the biggest thing to start off with, right? Of course, you can hop on the load boards, but I think it makes a ton of sense to go directly to the brokers that may be in your area or the shippers that may be in your area. And I think you want relationships with both. Um, I mean, I'll admit I come from the brokerage side and I don't come from the carrier side. So, you know, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt and from just being on one side. But I do think developing good relationships with multiple different brokers and staying in touch with them on a consistent basis, and then also shippers is really important because you're going to get value out of both, no matter what. And even from the ones that I talk to that sometimes have direct relationships, I think depending on market situations or customer situations, there's going to be a time where they go direct to shippers. There's going to be a time where honestly the freight that the brokers got may help them actually earn more. So I think
Mm.
being smart about, hey, how do you get a balanced attack? And how we would think about that on the brokerage side is that if you had one large shipper that, let's just say, does 80 to 90% of your revenue, you need to do a better job of diversifying your book and having other customers in the mix in the event that that one goes away. So, of course, you can play the load boards, but is it going to be the most sustainable, easiest, and whatnot? Like you're going to run into some just truth on, and this works on all three fronts with shippers, carriers, brokers. There's some bad actors in all three places. So
Mm.
taking the time to develop those relationships, I think would go a really long way. But it, again, I'd probably say start in your local area and then branch out from there. But don't be afraid to pick up the phone. Don't be afraid to shoot off emails. Just find some time to try to do some consistent outreach, and even if you can start with maybe a small goal of like 20 a day, and if you can work your way up, fantastic. But that 20 a day, I would highly believe would pay off at some point.
No, 100%, man. 20 a day definitely adds up after 30 days. And of course, like you said earlier, maybe 5, 10 solid, really great relationships, right? And
Yeah,
you can really build a nice business.
absolutely.
But I get the impression that, a lot of trucking companies, when they're just getting started, they're typically driving themselves, right? They have the finance department, the operations, human resources.
Yeah.
Would it make sense for them to kind of develop that marketing and sales side as a carrier company as well? Or, what would that kind of look like? What do you think?
I mean, sales is what generates you revenue and cash flow, right? And that's your oxygen for your business.
Mm.
So, I mean, I definitely think it's worth finding some time to be able to invest in it, like seriously, even if it's 30 minutes in a day, if you can block off 30 minutes in a day, if it's before lunch, after lunch, if it's the first thing you do in the morning or, last thing you do in the afternoon, to me, like even if you had to send out emails at 6 o'clock in the morning or at just truthfully like 7 o'clock at night, if that's the time that you can do it, hey, like great. And by the way, even if you send it at those times, there's lower volume going into their inbox at that time. So your email is going to stand out at least for a little bit of time. Let's not act like we're not looking at emails like while we're eating dinner and see that stuff pop
Uh,
up over the phone, right? So um again, yeah, I just think if you can find some dedicated time to do it and early on, the more the better. But
mm.
it'll always pay off because I just think customers come and go no matter what. And um yeah, man, it's just like cash is going to be the lifeblood. It's the lifeblood of your business. And if you don't have it coming in, you don't have a business.
Yeah, got you, man. I'm big on habits, man, and we have some habit trackers for sure when it comes to outreach, outbound. Pretty much, I love to track and measure everything, personal and business wise. So if you guys are interested in any type of tracking systems or spreadsheets that I have, just drop a KPI in the comment section. I'll definitely shoot over a couple of trackers for you. You can start utilizing those. But Josh, I really appreciate it, man. You shared some really incredible insights. But before we wrap up, I want to kind of make sure the audience doesn't miss out on an amazing opportunity. We've scratched the surface on what's possible in freight. Um, yeah, if is there, I don't want to let any opportunity slip away. So is there anything, last words, or if you could go back and tell yourself when you first started, what's some advice you would give yourself? Anything you want to share with the audience before we wrap up?
Absolutely. So I'll tell you guys my biggest mistake in starting Sales Dash that's helped me out, and I think this definitely goes into the freight world 100%, but it was to niche down. So you guys sometimes will hear, there's riches and niches, and basically in what you specialize in. My mistake was I thought I could just go after all kinds of industries, freight, real estate, insurance, and like provide a CRM for all of them.
Mm,
Everything turned around for Sales Dash as soon as I made the pivot and said this is only for freight. Speak in their language. We built the software to speak their language, and like they see shipper information, they can capture lanes, they can do all that stuff, right? It was so hard when we were built for everybody. And it's one of those things where sometimes you guys may have heard the quote, but like when you provide a message for everybody, you're speaking to nobody. And there's a
nobody.
really big, yeah, there's a really big difference, when you say, hey, like, can I move your freight versus like, hey, I'm specialized in only moving like hot shots and step decks. And we move custom fab machine equipment, industrial machinery equipment all the time, right? And we're able to help people save costs sometimes by optimizing depending on the trailer it goes on. Like that's a much more different message that you're sending in a way that you're able to connect with somebody. And the reason why, and I was the same, I was scared to do it because I'm like, it's a small slice of the pie, but people underestimate how big that slice can be. Like if you strictly move potatoes or if you strictly move um, industrial machinery equipment, air conditioning units, or, whatever perishable food it may be, like anything of that nature, there's a lot of that stuff that's out there, right? Retail
Mm,
signs, whatever it may be. Like, don't be afraid to sit there and brand yourself as that specific person. It's going to connect home with that person. So if you go to their website and that's the product, and you can say, hey, I'm specialized in moving that specific stuff. Um, you're going to connect better, I think, in your sales efforts. It really helped us when it came to marketing Sales Dash as a more freight broker specific CRM, because a lot of people, when they look to join us, they're like, hey, we're looking for something that's built for freight. We don't want to
yeah,
go and build one. And a lot of the top companies that I work with, they'll be like, look, man, I don't have time to go build a CRM. Like
yeah,
we got freight to move, we got freight to sell. That's what we do well. We don't want to worry about the software stuff. We want to worry about doing what we do well.
mm,
So, yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that I would say in general is don't be afraid to niche down and
yeah.
specialize and try a number of different ones. Like just try to be good at that stuff, is the biggest thing that I would say. So, um, I do have a free resource on our website on sales-crm.com. If you go there, and we have free resources that are on there, but one that I think would be really valuable for the audience is it's a free PDF document. It's 38 questions that you can consider asking shippers to learn more about their business. I think it'll be
Mm.
really good for people to consider when they are prospecting out to them, trying to get new business. There's 38 questions. It's a lot of questions that you can ask and consider when trying to learn their business, right? Instead of just like, hey, can I move your freight?
Yeah,
So it's a free resource. If you go to our website, sales-crm.com, go get that document. I think it can help the audience a little bit just when they think about how they're going to be reaching out to shippers. And then lastly, if you want to connect with me, best way to find me is on LinkedIn, Josh Lyles, Lyles.
LinkedIn, love it. Appreciate it, Josh. I hope you guys got a lot of value from this live stream tonight. It's definitely been a pleasure. Again, Josh, if you guys want to, I'd highly suggest, I'm pretty sure a lot of people have already been on sales-crm.com. Go get the 38 questions. I have them. Have a couple of other different resources from Sales Dash. So definitely something you want to put into your tool belt for sure. And yeah, let's see. We got some thank yous. Great presentation. Thank you. This was awesome. Perfect. Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
guys
you
for
guys.
watching. I appreciate it.
Yeah. You guys for tuning in. If you guys want any more information on, strengthening out any type of operations, building out and managing a pipeline or any type of marketing, daily trucking client acquisition partnership program is definitely available. We've got about 3 more spots for this month. So if you want a little bit more information on that, just drop a 1 in the comment section. Somebody from our team will reach out. And again, Josh, thank you again. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, Kalei. Thanks for having me, and talk to you soon, man. Appreciate it.
Gotcha, man. Take care. Peace.
Cheers.